Hi, everybody. We're going to get started with this Crushing Out Q&A in just a second. I'm going to get my Instagram up and running, and then we will be going. Hello, Instagram. Yes, there we go. All right. Oh, that's interesting. I started my Instagram, but for some reason it's very zoomed in on my face, which is a little distracting. So hopefully I won't won't be seeing that too much. In any case, welcome to Crushing Out's Q&A every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. I'm here to answer, of course, mind-body questions. And let's talk about what mind-body questions are all about. Mind-body symptoms are all about anything that your brain can generate that happens in your body that is not explained by a structural, medical, or purely physical experience. And the vast majority of all symptoms do come from mind-body experience. Now, how did I discover this? I discovered it the hard way. I discovered it through 8 years of chronic, or seemingly chronic, every day, every minute back pain. My God, that Instagram thing is very distracting. Give me a second. I got to move this over. Goodbye, me. Okay, now I can see the comments, but not me there. So I experienced 8 years of this. And when I think about it, I've actually experienced mind-body symptoms my entire life. And in fact, it is the human condition. People experience mind-body symptoms all the time, head to toe. So here's my rule of thumb. If you can experience it physically, if it can be done physically, it can happen for mind-body reasons. In other words, if the body can do it, the mind can use it. And of course, we've got to get checked out by a medical doctor to make sure that there's nothing wrong with us medically speaking. But not only is it typically not the case that there's anything going on medically or even structurally in any way that requires an intervention. Usually our bodies are just going to heal or get past whatever the issue is and get right back to things. But not only that, a lot of the diagnoses that we receive turn out to be not actually correlated with the symptoms themselves. Think about it this way. They, meaning the doctors or whoever, whatever professionals are trying to help you understand what's happening for you. They're trying to understand it through the lens that they can, the best that they can. But if they're thinking purely physically and they're not even thinking about mind-body symptoms, then they're just going to look at the body and be like, what's happening here? Which leads to a lot of misdiagnosis. Things like herniated discs causing back pain. Actually not true. The best medical journals in the nation and the world show tons of studies that show these structural issues do not correlate with pain and usually with other symptoms as well. So we are here to talk about what these mind-body issues or symptoms are, how to understand them, and how to work with them. Now, I got out of my experience of 8 years of that seemingly chronic back pain from reading Dr. John Sarno's books. Many of you will have heard of him. And Dr. Sarno was just an amazing human being, an amazing doctor. And his writing was great as well. And it is what started to get me out of the issues that I was having. What it turns out is that what we are thinking or feeling, whatever goes on up here, becomes very real in the body. And that means if we don't change what goes on up here, we're going to keep right on going with what we have going on in terms of the symptom life. Well, when I discovered Dr. Sarno, he said you have to accept the diagnosis to get better. And I thought about that. And what I realized is it's more than just accepting the diagnosis. It's accepting all of it, that the mind and body can do these things, that it can operate in these ways. It's about being certain. So I talk about how to bring down doubt. Now, we'll get into that in a second. But as I worked to figure out with certainty that I had mind-body issues and that that's why I would get better and how I would get better, I had to get to certainty about many different aspects. So I had lots of questions. And in asking the questions, I got a lot of answers. Then I started working with other people once I got better. They had lots of questions, and I got them answers. And what I found is that the more we get answers to our questions that are to our satisfaction, the more we settle down, the more we feel safe, the more we feel we can manage these symptoms. And so I developed a system in the early going after getting better myself, where I thought about what did I do to get better? And I structured this system around three main areas: feeling, thinking, and relationship with the self. And I call these the three columns. So there's the emotions column, which of course deals with feeling. There's the doubt column, which deals with thinking and how our thinking being the same keeps us in the same place. And then there's the power column, which is about changing your relationship with yourself. When I answer questions tonight, it's all going to be about these columns. How do we think about whatever the question is in terms of the columns, and what kind of answers can I give to help people understand what it is they need to do, how they need to be thinking, what they might shift to shift away from whatever mind body problem they're having. Now, I'll say one last thing before we dive in with questions. And that is that these columns, you can understand where to work based on how the symptoms are behaving. If the symptoms are seemingly chronic, I never use the word chronic because none of it is chronic. You're not stuck with it. If it's seemingly chronic, then it's a doubt column issue, which means we've got to know what you're thinking and see how we can shift that thinking. If it is more of an acute symptom, an onset or an uptick that just seemed to come out of nowhere, not related to any kind of physical event or anything that we worried about in terms of a physical event, then that is an emotions column symptom, the acute onsets and upticks. So we're going to look at our feelings and recognizing in the moment what kind of unconscious emotion that we're not aware of could be driving that symptom to have arrived on the scene all of a sudden. So now we've got acute and seemingly chronic covered. When it comes to the power column, those are symptoms that we don't tend to find out much about until the doubt is down and we've learned more about emotions. But then once that happens, we can see much more about what's going on in our interactions with ourselves. And a lot of times our symptoms are actually pushing us to see certain things, to understand certain things. And once we understand that and kind of receive the communication of the symptoms will go away. So you got 3 different ways to make different kinds of symptoms go away, and we're going to talk about them all. Okay. Shelby had a comment. Didn't know Sarno, but from what I hear, I put you right there by him, Dan. Thank you, Shelby. I really appreciate it. Dr. Sarno is a fantastic hero of mine. But I did find that this was actually totally shocking to me at the time. But I found as I thought about it that I was like, I actually am saying and thinking some things that other people even in the mind body community weren't saying. Then I got another shock as I kept working at this when I realized we're at the beginning of this. We're at the beginning of this movement to help everybody understand this. When I think back to my suffering, one of the worst parts is that no one around me knew how to help me and they didn't know what was wrong at all. And now that wouldn't be the case. It's still kind of the case in that a lot of people aren't going to know about this, but the word is spreading. The science is spreading. The logic is spreading, and we're going to keep at it. Okay, Susan Sereno, good to see you here. Dan, you have helped me to believe my symptoms are 100% TMS. So TMS is tension myositis syndrome. That is what Dr. Sarno called mind-body symptoms at the time. It's a term I have great fondness for, but you're going to hear lots of different terms that all mean the same thing. TMS, mind-body symptoms, mind-body issues, neuroplastic symptoms, functional neurological disorder, although I don't love the term disorder, mind-body syndrome, though I don't love syndrome. There's all kinds of terms for this. They're all the same thing. Central sensitization, that's another one. These all mean the same thing. It means that your mind affects what goes on in your body. But Susan, the fact that I've actually convinced you that 100% that you, I saw Knox, sorry, I got distracted. Knox Flama said, this is peak eye contact. It's true. On Instagram, I do not know why it is behaving this way. It's so strange. Well, sorry on Instagram for me staring at you like this. I'll make my eyes really big for you guys out there. Very, very strange. In any case, please ignore the picture and just talk to me. But Susan, the fact that you are convinced, it took some talking. That's what some people don't realize is that these are conversations, and these conversations really matter because it's not likely that you're going to become totally convinced in one sitting or in one phrase. A lot of times you'll need to go over it a couple times. Now, I'm going to make reference to this at different points, but I have certain resources available to you in terms of, there's a lot of jokes about the eyes. Shelby, you just cracked me up. I'll read that in a second. But there's a lot of resources I have on my website. If you need help, this Q&A helps a lot. It helps you get answers, but there are resources that help you get even more answers. And one of them is on my website, www.crushingdoubt.com. I have these groups. These are Zoom sessions, and they're a lot like this, except you're on Zoom with me. So we can have lots of interaction back and forth. And that makes a big, big difference in me answering your questions because I can hear about different aspects of things. You could ask me different questions until we know what do I need to answer to help you get the information that you need. So check out my website for that, for the groups. You can also get my book, which is available on Amazon. That is the most comprehensive mind-body piece of information that you could find anywhere. I put every single thing I needed to put in this book. Then I had to work hard to condense it as much as possible because there's so much in it. Okay, for the king. Hello, Dan. I realized I was complaining about my symptoms to get sympathy and validate my pain. How do I get past feeling the deep need for that? Okay, first of all, I really admire that you took a look at that and recognized that, because a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, look, you deserve sympathy for your pain and you deserve it to be validated. But to recognize, again, giving you huge credit for this, that can't be the primary thing, that's huge. In fact, I have something on my website, these mind body guides that are kind of pieces of information to help you understand different aspects of things. One of them is called the troubleshooting mind body guide, and it identifies like types of experiences people get stuck in that won't allow themselves to make progress. This is actually one of them for the king, where people are actually looking for the empathy more than they're looking for the answers, which I'm not saying is entirely the case that you were doing that, but recognizing that there was some part that wanted that, now you can be free to get the answers. So when you say, how do I get past the feeling, that deep need for that, there's two main answers that I have for that. The first is this. I think if I gave you a choice and I said to you, okay, you could have no pain but you can't get any of the sympathy, or you could have the pain and get a lot of the sympathy. I know what you're going to choose. But the way that you'll get there is to recognize that the method is information. You just need the right information. And I know we're just starting to talk about that, but this is where coming to groups with me, you get much more information, or even just reading my book. There's tons of information. I can give you information here, but it's in one question at a time. Whereas a broader picture, whether it's my book or talking with me in group or whatever it is, you could also work with people that I've trained in the field. You got to get answers that are comprehensive. And I think what you'll find is the deep need for validation and sympathy, that's going to go away when you're getting the results that you need and you're getting relief. You're going to want that even more. But the second thing that's going to help you get past the feeling, the deep need for that, is this is what I call power column work. We all have experiences and parts of ourselves that kind of need a deep healing process of some kind. And the power column is where we can do that. The need for this is probably coming from a very, very big deficit that you've experienced of care. And the power column helps you process that. Now, it may not make a whole lot of sense to people who are not yet understanding, what these mind-body symptoms are all about. But the power column is a place where we can do a couple of things. One, we can look at the past and get to a place where there's a way we can put it away and not feel as bad about it by reprocessing. What did it mean? Mourning the loss of whatever happened, mourning whatever happened, and accepting the fullness of the trauma. These are the things that I talk about in the power column. I think when you're past that, you're not going to have this deep need for the other things. Okay, that's my short answer for the king, but let's do follow-up. In a group, we would go back and forth a number of different times and we'd get so much further. So I also love the groups. They're so supportive, such a great group of people. Okay, tell me if that answers your question. By the way, if I miss any questions, please do let me know. Okay, Patty Flowers, good to see you here. Constant pain? Allodynia/neuropathy that spreads. What category is that? My symptoms don't seem to be like anyone else's. Okay. So first of all, constant anything, that to me is a doubt column symptom. It means that your thinking is staying in the same place, probably in relation to fear. Okay. So there's different kinds of forms of doubt. Fear is the strongest form of doubt. Then there's confusion. And I call those the negative side of doubt. Those are the parts of doubt that just make you worried and feel worse and worse, and the symptoms go up. But there's also the positive side of doubt, and that's where we start to get honing in on answers. My answer to For the King, positive side of doubt is where we need to go. How can you get past the feeling, the need for sympathy? Get more focused on the answers. And the answers can be found in just lack of certainty and unanswered questions. Those are the forms of doubt that are workable. Okay, Patty, constant pain, that's the doubt column. Now, allodynia, which I believe is sensitivity on the skin, I sometimes have to look up the different things because I don't think in terms of diagnosis, because the entire body feels like one thing to me with the mind. But neuropathy is pain in the nerves that spreads. What category is that? So when symptoms are spreading, that also is a doubt column issue, particularly with fear. Your symptoms are going up because fear is running wild right now. I'm not saying that critically at all. I totally understand, but I want you to reduce the fear as best as possible. And if coming to work with me does that, which is a big part of what I do, please come do that. Okay, so this is all doubt column. Now, you said my symptoms don't seem to be like anyone else's. I want to give a piece of encouragement to you all, that doubt loves to use different things against you. And one of the things it loves to use against you is the idea, nope, your symptoms are different. Patty, nothing you've described here is all that different. I've treated people with constant pain. I've treated people with allodynia. I've treated people with neuropathy. I've treated people with symptoms that spread. What you need to think about instead is not, are my symptoms different or not? But because everybody has had, I don't mean everybody has the same symptoms, but I've seen enough of all of these symptoms to know they're all in the mind-body range and normal within that. What we really need to think about is, what does it mean about what's happening for you? And so my feedback to you is, this is fear-based. This is about doubt. And we've got to get you to certainty that you're safe, and then it will start to calm down. All right, let me know if that answers your question. Shelby Geyer has a joke about my eye. Let's see what's happening on Instagram. It's still really close. Oh, here it is. What is happening, Instagram? Don't get it. In any case, we've just got a weird eye contact thing, but there it is. Shelby says he's detecting doubt closely with his eyes. Listen, doubt cannot escape me. I'll see it. Yes. All right. Thanks, Shelby. I appreciate the joke. All right. Beatrice says, can you clarify that if my chronic symptoms experience uptick, i.e. the burning feet and shins burning more intensely, that is for emotional reasons or just higher doubt? Does my question make sense? Your question does make sense, and I want to explain a particular aspect of this. But I also want to say, when I answer any question, try to remember, I'm not just here to answer your one question. I want you to listen to every answer I give and see how it all fits together in one system, because that's what's going to help you most. So, Beatrice, the question you're asking is, when you have an uptick of a symptom that's already there, essentially you're asking, is this emotions column or doubt column that's leading to it? And what I would say is this. Usually with an uptick, it means there's an emotion. The emotions are for the onsets and upticks. But the one exception to that is when doubt goes really high. And that can happen when fear goes up. So I would say it depends on what's happening. If you just did something, like you just did an exercise, and then you're afraid of what's going to happen from that exercise, that sounds more like doubt going up. But if you're just sitting in a chair and, not really thinking about anything, and then boom, it goes up, that I would consider emotions. Now, to make it both more complicated and also more simplified, fear is the emotional form of doubt. Meaning, if your fear goes up, not only is your doubt going up, but you're having an emotional experience. So I'd say it's a little of both, and we need to tease out what's happening here. But I would think about it both. Did my doubt go up? And is there something going on emotionally? Typically speaking, if you just did something that was triggering, meaning like an activity, and then you weren't sure how it was going to go, that would start to move you more in the direction of doubt. If you were just sitting there and suddenly it came on out of nowhere, I'd be thinking, wait a minute, what's going on emotionally? Did I just get a text or something? Did I just talk to somebody? Did somebody just say something upsetting? Did I, some kind of thought crossed my mind that I have feelings about. So most of the time, I'm going to want you to look at emotions. But when you're at the phase of recovery that you're at right now, fear is still playing a big role. Now, if fear is down, fear specifically, if you have other doubts, it's different than fear. It's not going to lead to symptom upticks as much. Then you can more reliably say, this is emotional. Okay, let's follow up on that and see if that made sense to you. Beatrice says, Patty, I have those symptoms. So Patty, there you go. You are certainly not alone. And they're quite common actually. Patty asked Beatrice, constant, no flares? And Beatrice said, Patty, yes, in some parts of the body constant, some flares too, but overall hypersensitivity. So this is another thing that people can get out of the groups. Not only can you come and talk to me and get your questions answered, but there's a chat in there and you guys can talk to each other in just this way. There's lots of learning that happens. And in addition, there's an online community where you can post written questions in between sessions and I answer those as well. So lots of answers to be had. Thank you for supporting Patty there, Beatrice. Very helpful. Okay, Haley. I've had ulnar nerve surgeries, and sometimes the side of my hand is so sensitive, even the touch of a blanket. Any tips? Well, the first thing I want to say is try not to get scared by any aspect of these things, including the amazing amount of sensitivity, like to the touch of a blanket. That is not at all atypical, especially right after a big flare-up of mind-body issues. We can get extremely sensitive. I once had this with my foot where like a sheet on the foot, anything touching it at all was just like very sensitive. And I had to work my way through this, bring down the doubt. I had to learn about what the emotions were. And then I had to kind of flow into power. But the biggest part was bringing down the doubt. So in terms of tips, this is an area where I wish we were in group because I could just say to you, okay, well, what's going on? I'd ask questions and then I learn more about you. And then I'd be like, now I got a better tip for you. But what I will do is I'll give you my first tip and then we'll just have some back and forth about it through the writing if possible. So the first thing we need to do is bring down the doubt. Bring down the doubt that this is anything but mind body. That's the number one thing. There are 3 levels of doubt that I've kind of teased out over time and thinking about. Level 1 doubt is this mind body or not? Level 2 doubt is, I know this is mind body, but is my symptom harder to conquer than others? Which actually you kind of heard of in what Patty was saying. She had a little level 2 doubt there. And level 3 doubt is, I know it's mind body. I know my symptoms no harder to conquer than others, but can I do it? Is there something about me that's going to hold me back? That's level 3 doubt. So when you say any tips, we got to work on level 1 doubt first. First things first, we've got to make sure that you know that this is not driven by an injury. It's not driven by something that is structural. It's not driven by the surgeries. And for you to believe me about that, this is another reason that groups is so important, or talking to me directly can be so important. The more you know me, the more you're going to be able to trust that what I'm saying is true. But ultimately, we have to get you to believe it. As I often say, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. Why is that? Because these are mind-body symptoms. They come from whatever's going on in your mind. Let's see. Haley then had a follow-up. Ulnar nerve was moved years ago and have had revisions. None of that's going to matter, Haley. Now, that being said, this is just the beginning of our conversations about this, I hope. I really want to help you with this, but when I say things, I always mean to be encouraging, but I'm aware how much is my input going to mean to you until you hear why I think what I think. Ultimately, keep asking your questions. Go after whatever the answers that you need to really feel like you can believe all of this. Okay? Soaring High, good to see you on Instagram. Do we need to change our actions and personality to get better? Okay. I love so many of these questions, partly because I know there's so many other people who have these same questions. So I'm going to give you my first answer, and then I want to follow up. The first thing, I'll address personality before I address actions. You absolutely do not need to change your personality to get better. If anything, what you're going to find is we've got to channel that personality that you have in the right directions. It is not about changing your personality at all. I sometimes get this question, especially about what Dr. Sarno called goodists, people who are people pleasers, always taking care of other people. And they say, well, if that's the problem, I got to change. I got to start being not as nice. That's not actually true. You do not have to change your personality, and you actually don't even need to change your actions necessarily. I'm going to get into this in a second. You don't need to change your actions if they are actions that make you feel good about you. Continue, like if you're a nice person and you think it's causing you some symptoms, guess what? You don't need to stop doing nice things. You need to stop feeling the internal pressure inside related to doing those nice things. So I'm still every bit a goodist as I used to be, but I don't feel as much internal pressure about it now. So ultimately, here's what we need to change. We need to change our relationship with ourselves. We need to change how we're thinking. We need to change how we interact with what we're feeling by recognizing what we're feeling in the emotions column and making adjustments in the power column. There are some actions, though, that you probably will want to change and that will lead to better things. And I'm going to say just the basics of those. First of all, when you're taking an action, my first rule of thumb is do the thing that lowers the doubt. So changing your actions as it relates to doubt, very important. Changing your actions as it relates to your personality and how you like to live your life, not so much, because the other part of this is the power column where we want you to align with yourself. A lot of times, though, we could think about it this way. Change the actions that don't align with yourself and keep doing the actions that do. They're not the problem. If there is a problem around that, it's about how it feels inside. Okay, that's my answer for now, Soaring High, but please let me know if you need more information on that. Okay, Patty Flowers has a follow-up. I don't have flares, just constant pain, so I think that I am different. I know it's mind-body syndrome. Okay, so you know it's mind-body, so level 1 doubt is down enough. What you're having is what I refer to as level 2 doubt. I'm different. My symptoms are different. Patty, what you're describing, I've heard so many times, including constant pain. You know, this channel is called Crushing Doubt. And the doubt column is all about constant symptoms that are just always there. When I had my back pain, it was always there until I was able to bring down my doubt. As soon as that doubt came down, that's when the symptoms started to ease. Let's do some follow-up on that, Patty. Let's see what you think about that. For the King says, quite helpful. Thank you. I'll look seriously at joining the groups. I would love to have you there, and I'm glad that was helpful. Okay. Shelby says, amazing group. Thank you, Shelby. I appreciate it. And For the King says, sounds very promising. Okay, I appreciate that. All right. Now, Beatrice is giving a follow-up. Thanks, Dan. That's what I figured. It can be both. It can be both, but at the same time, we can figure this out. I have an overarching line that I say, which is you make sense and your symptoms make sense. When things aren't making sense, doubt can run wild. So even though it could be both, we've got to figure out which is which. And by analyzing what you're thinking and what you just experienced and what you might be feeling, we're going to be able to figure that out. Okay? All right. Nox Flamma says, it's so crazy to me to have learned through you and my research that chronic dry cough / air hunger is mind-body, vagal nerve involvement. Okay. So I hear you, Nox Flamma. Listen, there's really nothing that has been more mind-blowing to me than mind-body reality. I went from being a person who just kind of, I don't mean this critically of myself, but I was kind of blindly just believing in medicine. That's their area. They'll help me. They'll know what to do. And I wasn't thinking I was going to have to do anything. But I went from that to realizing from reading Dr. Sarno, oh my God, the entire society is missing this entirely. And first it was just about back pain. Then I started thinking about other things. And I was like, this extends to virtually everything. Then I started looking into the science and logic of it. And what I found is, wow, almost every symptom we have is mind-body. Now, there are some symptoms that relate to running into a brick wall or getting COVID. There are medical things, and we've got to be careful that anything life or death, we're going to get checked out by doctors. They are really good with that. What they're not so good with is these other symptoms, especially seemingly chronic ones. They actually tend to be pretty decent with a lot of acute symptoms, but not so much with seemingly chronic ones. And so this chronic dry cough or air hunger, as you're calling it, Nox Flama, these are, if you think about it this way, this might be the easiest way to put it. Your body can already do those things. It can do it for medical or physical or structural reasons. It can also do it because the mind controls it. Now, one important thing for me in getting my questions answered was to figure out, how does the brain actually do that? So I credit Dr. Sarno with this as well. He only mentioned it in like one paragraph of his last book, The Divided Mind, but he mentioned a woman named Candace Pert who wrote a book called Molecules of Emotion. And I looked into Molecules of Emotion, and it talked about the brain structures, the brain chemicals that can lead to these changes. In looking at it, the easiest way of putting it is that it's actually the hormone system. She calls them peptides, but whatever we call them, the brain can send messengers to any cell in the body to do anything it wants in whatever pattern it wants. And so if it's got a reason to do that, it's going to do that. The columns, by the way, they reverse all of that by helping us understand what's happening and why. They're like a detective system to figure out what's happening and why. Okay. Ani Crowfoot, good to see you here. Let's see. You said, can you talk about anxiety as a symptom? How much is it related to the fear of loss of control? Okay, so I've really come to, as I've explored this, I've come to see that so many things are just symptoms. That includes anxiety. That includes depression. That includes obsessive thinking. Most of the diagnoses that you hear about in psychiatry or in the psychology field, most of those diagnoses are actually just labeling symptoms. And that's not really a diagnosis. You know, the one diagnosis, or it may be the only diagnosis I really agree with, but PTSD, trauma, that's a diagnosis. There are signs of it. And by the way, most people have some form of it. So that's a diagnosis. Anxiety is a symptom. And anxiety, I like to think of as a symptom just like back pain or dry eyes or tinnitus or IBS. It's just a physical experience, actually. Now, the one difference is that anxiety can also take the form of thought patterns. But if you think about it, that's true for all of these symptoms. Shoulder pain, it starts off just as a physical symptom, but then it develops a pattern of thinking. My shoulder's going to hurt when I move this way. Maybe I did this. Maybe this is what's wrong. So that's where the physical symptom leads to thinking. Anxiety sometimes goes the opposite way, where the thinking leads to the physical symptom, but it's all mind-body. So, Ani, you said, can you talk about anxiety as a symptom? It's 100% a mind-body symptom. People in comas, they don't have a lot of anxiety unless they're, I suppose maybe if we understood what was happening in their consciousness, maybe there is some. But people need a brain to have anxiety. They need to have a functional brain. So when you say, how much is it related to the fear of loss of control? I would say this: fear of loss of control is one aspect that can lead to anxiety, but anxiety can happen for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes it can actually happen because we fear that we're going to gain control. As an example, when you start to move into the power column and you start to become powerful, it can feel actually scary. It can raise anxiety. And it's not because we're losing control. It's because we don't trust ourselves to have the control, or we don't trust that the people around us are going to like us having the control. So I would say, in relation to your very interesting question, Ani, is that the fear of loss of control is just one. It's a big one, but it's just part of what we could describe as anxiety. What I want you to think of anxiety as is there's a mismatch between whatever's happening or what we're imagining is going to happen and what we're comfortable with. Fear of loss of control being one of them. All right, tell me if that makes sense to you. All right. Haley says, the doctors told me the nerve looks bad and damaged, and that's why. And I don't blame you for doing anything. But then she says, but I don't want to believe that, So Haley, so here's the thing. It really, when I hear the doctors said a certain thing, I have to say, I take it with a grain of salt because I wonder, well, but if they don't know about mind body experience, how are they going to really have a good differential diagnosis? Even worse than that, and I credit Dr. Sarno with this one as well. There are so many supposedly structural issues that we are seeing on imaging or testing that turn out to not correlate. So, what does it mean that the nerve looks bad? What does it mean it looks damaged? How should it be behaving? How did that even happen? To me, if the questions don't end up having answers that make sense, then we need to be asking deeper questions. And that includes, could this be mind body? I would think that this probably is, but maybe you'll tell me a whole different story where it's like, a whole big set of things happened. I highly doubt it, though. I've heard thousands upon thousands of stories, and they all end up being, nope, that was mind body. And the idea that there was a structural problem or a damage turned out to be actually totally inadvertent. One of the reasons we know this, Haley, this is for Haley, but it's for everybody, is that they started studying asymptomatic athletes, people who were just having no symptoms whatsoever. They did MRIs of them, and they were a train wreck. Just damage everywhere. It's wear and tear. I sometimes think of it like if you've got a 10, 15-year-old car and it's got some dents in it and stuff, still a car. Or if you got a t-shirt that has some rips at the sleeve, still a t-shirt. Doesn't matter. We are that functional. Now, as I often say, and I've even said tonight, doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. But I want to have this discussion with you. And I see you said you may check out the group. I would love that. Anybody who needs to find out more information about that can email me, dan@crushingdoubt.com. And I'm happy to tell you more about it or send you the links. Okay, Shelby says, 2 for the king. Dan's full of knowledge and compassion, as well as the group. Thank you, Shelby. It is a very special place. And by the way, I want to say this too. People in the group are making really big gains. They make gains all the time. One of the things we do in the group is we share wins, and it's incredibly encouraging. People end up talking about symptom reduction, but sometimes it's about cognitive gains. I'm thinking in a more positive way. I can see why I'm going to get out of this. I've gotten a new insight. So there's lots of ways that people take steps forward here. Okay, I'm going to take a couple more questions, then we'll wrap up for tonight. All right, Haley says, so a nerve that's been crushed by scar tissue, it doesn't have to be an issue. Interesting. So no, not necessarily at all. First of all, scar tissue rarely causes any issues whatsoever. Haley, the thing that we need to evaluate here is who's saying that the nerve has been crushed and why are they saying it's been crushed? One of the things that struck me in Dr. Sarno's books, and actually this was in his third book, The Mind Body Prescription, he talks about how a compressed nerve goes numb. Doesn't cause pain, it goes numb. So I would be interested to hear if you're having primarily numbness versus pain. I can't remember what you said going up to the top. Let's see. If it's sensitive to the touch, it's not numb. So these doctors they're really, how do I put this as delicately as possible? Doctors are really, really helpful in lots of areas. Most of them really want to help. But they are misunderstanding so much and their science is so far behind. Not the science, actually. Their awareness of the science is so far behind that they're just trying to apply the best information they have. But they're so not informed in these areas that we get really bad information. So I often say this is like listening to a 4-year-old give a physics lecture. They're going to say a bunch of crazy stuff like, oh yeah, when you eat the ice cream, you can throw things further. No, that may have just been one time. It does not correlate. So, Haley, all we have to do is be good scientists here. We need to call it into question. We just didn't know we had to call this into question because we thought these medical doctors were well-trained and they'd know better than us. That's certainly what I thought. As it turns out, unfortunately, that's not true in certain areas. With life or death stuff, yep. But with this stuff, no. We've got to start looking at this. So we have to figure out who said that scar tissue is crushing this nerve? And why would that cause the issue? We got to call it into question. Okay. All right. I'm going to take one or two more questions, then we'll wrap up for tonight. Jamie says, "Hi, Dan. My dizziness is high again, but not shocked because of the amount of things going on right now. What column should I be working on based on what you know is happening?" Okay. Actually, I want to pause and thank you. Thanks, Rick. Rick Garrett gave a nice tip here. This is something that you guys can do, and it really does help. I often run at a deficit doing this work, which is, it's okay with me, but if I can close the gap, it really helps me keep doing it. So when people contribute, it really helps. And Rick, if you got a question that you want me to answer, please do let me know. I want to make sure I didn't miss any of your questions, by the way. Okay. But really, really appreciate it. Okay, back to you, Jamie. My dizziness is high again, but not shocked because of the amount of things going on right now. What column should I be working on based on what you know is happening? Okay, so here's the way that I think about this. This is for Jamie, but it's for everybody. It's not really about you're going to be working in one column at any moment a lot of the time. Sometimes it is, but mostly I want you to work in the columns all together. So first, bring down doubt. This is the flow. Bring down doubt, learn about emotions, flow into power. Now, sometimes you're not going to have to work in any one column much at all. Like Jamie, maybe you're not going to need to work in doubt that much, but you're still going to need to go there first. You're still going to need to say, I need to remind myself this dizziness is not high for any other reason other than all the stuff going on. It sounds like you already did that. And yet I want to make sure that that's what you're doing. Once you've done that, you're going to be able to see everything that's underneath because doubt covers over things otherwise. So then the next step would be to work in the emotions column, just to get the emotional information or control the symptoms. So you're wanting to control the symptoms. This is an uptick of that symptom. I'd be working primarily in the emotions column, but you got to go to doubt first to make sure. Sounds like you've already done that. I'd be working in the emotions column to get the information. And I want to say this. When you're working in the emotions column, two main things can happen that are successes. One is you can get the information that makes these emotions conscious and makes the symptoms go down when you're certain that's what it is. So I'd be looking there. See if you can get specific about this, Jamie, and figure out what's going on. Secondarily, though not any less important, emotions column information can feed your work in the power column. The ironic thing is, yes, you're going to be working in the emotions column as your primary work of the moment, but ultimately, this is about power. And sometimes you're going to need to go into the power column, even right now, and say to yourself, what do I need to feel safe? What do I need to feel good? Because sometimes that can drive symptoms really high if you're afraid. Now, you've told me about some things that are going on right now, one of them with a particular friend, and that's driving these symptoms really high. So look in the emotions column to get the specific information and work in the power column to make adjustments as needed to make sure you're aligning with yourself, and just make sure you're checking the doubt column so that it didn't, grow bigger. Okay, guys. Great questions tonight, as always. Keep them coming. I will be here next Thursday. That's going to be the November 20th. In 2 weeks, I'm out because it's Thanksgiving in America. But I will be here next week. I'll be there the 2 weeks after that, the week following Thanksgiving, which I believe is December 3rd. So 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific always. I really appreciate all of you. I want you to keep your questions coming. Come visit me in group anytime. It's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. On Mondays, it's 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern. On Tuesdays, it's 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern. And on Wednesdays, it's from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern. I tried to make different times so that everybody could make it work, including internationally. And we are getting great results. Okay, guys, keep up the good work. Keep your questions coming. You've got to get them answered because it's changing your thinking. That's going to change what goes on in your body. Okay.